training in the Dharma.
So first of all, introductions. I think you probably know who I am. You probably guessed anyway, because the advert said that I was running this. But the advert was a bit misleading, actually, because it's not really me running it. I'm just curating it. The real expert here is Danadasa, and I'm going to introduce you to him now. Danadasa, hello.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
And where are you at the moment?
I'm in San Francisco.
And where were you last night at 1 o'clock in the morning?
Last night, I was here with you and all the people on that side of the globe. Yeah, so I didn't get to bed. Well, actually, we got offline about 3 a.m. And I'd say I got to sleep about 4 a.m. So I did get a few hours of sleep.
Right. So Danadasa is a real hero. He's got up in the middle of the night. Well, I don't think he even went to bed last night. He just carried on, probably listening to, it's an old joke now, but probably listening to the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane, because he's from San Francisco, and that's what they do all night, I think, there. So this seminar is going to be about half speaking, Danadasa and I speaking, and half you doing stuff in groups. And we're going to introduce you to your groups in a moment. You're going to be in a group, and you'll stay in that group throughout. But before we continue, once I started talking to Danadasa this week about what we were going to do, we realized we had way too much material for 1.5 hours. Danadasa has got a lot of experience, and he's got a lot to say. He's not going to be able to say it all here. And so what we decided to do is, once this is over, we're going to start making podcasts. And what we'd like you to do, not here, not in the chat box, but after the seminar, type up any questions, any things that we didn't cover, type up what you want to know, what you want to do, send it to Danadasa. You'll get a link to Danadasa's email soon. And then we will look at all that feedback and all the questions and so on, and we'll build our podcasts around those. So this is the first of, we hope, quite a few. So I think that's all I need to do. I'm going to hand you over to Danadasa now, who's going to talk about hosting meetings.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Ratnaguna. Yeah, so the first part of this seminar will be just about very basic Zoom functionality. And we really, in the 90 minutes that we have together, we're not going to show you exactly how to do all the things like, setting up breakout rooms and things like that. Because it's actually better for you to do that with a group of friends. So what we did in San Francisco was, after the lockdown began, in San Francisco, the teaching kula, so I'm part of the teaching kula, we gathered I'd say about 5 or 6 of us. And what we did was we all practiced on Zoom. So we all took turns being the host, and we all took turns, sending the group to breakout rooms and sending broadcast messages and bringing people back. So it was just so helpful to see exactly what happens when you press buttons and kind of learn together. And it was very much a learning together, where somebody said, oh, I can't find this button on my screen. And we would all kind of help each other. So I'd actually strongly recommend people to do that, because we're not going to have time to do that here. And actually, in the document that Vajrashura sent before this seminar, there's 3 sections to that. And the last section in that document is labeled "Practicing Zoom by Hosting a Pretend Meeting." So that is a list of all the different skills or things you can try when if you decide to get together with a group of friends to just practice hosting a meeting. So that document actually has 3 different sections. The first is called Helpful Tips for Your Home Environment. And that's just very straightforward sort of things. And that's a good thing to actually send to participants when you're setting up a new group, to actually send that information out to people so that they have a sense of etiquette in their home environment. So we're not going to go over that because you can read that on your own. So the first part, helpful tips for your home environment. The second is basic Zoom skills for teachers. And that section of that document just gives a bunch of links to video tutorials and whatnot, so you can watch those. And again, the third section is practicing by hosting a pretend meeting. Yeah. So we're actually going to practice something real quick right now, which is renaming yourself if your name is incorrect. So you'll notice on your little box, you can see your name on the bottom left-hand corner. And if it says something like iPad, it'd be nice to actually have that say your name, because when you're in a small discussion group, it's really helpful to see people's names. So Vajrashura, I was wondering if you could put those instructions up on how to rename. Yeah, so we're just going to pause for about a minute for anyone who needs to rename themselves to go ahead and do that. And you can use those instructions there on the screen. And while people are doing that, I'll just say what's going to happen next.
Just before you go on, Danadasa,
oh, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, if people have got gallery view, that first bit there where it says click on participants at the bottom of your screen, they might be going right to a wrong place. I'm just, or maybe, no, that's fine. Sorry.
It's still at the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, it's still at the bottom. Yeah, so while people are renaming each other, renaming themselves, here's what's going to happen next is Vajrashura is going to send all of us to breakout rooms. And these breakout rooms, the people in your breakout rooms will be the same people that you'll be regathering with a little later in the seminar to do some Dharma study together. And in this first breakout room that we send you to, we're going to practice two skills. The first has to do with muting and unmuting. So I found it to be really helpful to, around etiquette for discussion groups, to have only one microphone unmuted at any given time in an open discussion. So in other words, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. And then to speak, you can unmute your microphone, speak, and then mute your microphone at the end. And Ratnaguna and I will be saying a bit more later about why this is an effective practice. And then we're going to practice that by actually going around the room, your group, and just simply sharing your name, where you live, and your home center. Yeah. So what this is going to look like, you'll arrive in your groups, you will all mute yourselves, and then someone will volunteer to go first. They'll unmute themselves, say your name, where you live, home center, and then you'll pick the next person to introduce themselves, and then you'll mute yourself. And then that person will unmute themselves, and you'll just go around the room. Yeah, I think that's all that needs to be said. Ratnaguna, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
Can I just check how many you want in each room?
7-ish.
7, okay.
Yeah, so Vajrashura, why don't you go ahead and send people to their breakout rooms, and we'll have you there for about 7 minutes. And if you finish early, you can always find the leave button and click on that and come back to the main room. But in about 7 minutes, Vajrashura will be ending the breakout rooms. And what you'll see is you'll see a little pop-up that says the breakout room will close in, and there'll be a countdown, a 60-second countdown. So when you see that, that's just a cue to, to wrap up whatever it is that you're doing.
Before we do that, should we display how to mute and unmute yourself before they go?
Yeah, why don't we do that? That's a good idea.
Can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a question.
How do I get off the rename instructions? Well, you can't until I unshare you, I'm afraid. Okay. So whenever you want me to send people to rooms, Danadasa.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we're good to go again, Ratnaguna.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. One of the slight problems of running this seminar is we've got absolutely no idea how those groups went. And you can't give us feedback. It would take us all day to give feedback. So we just cross fingers that that was okay and useful. The groups from the earlier seminar seem to be useful for people, but we got no idea what you all did just then. So we're just going to carry on as if it was good. So Ratnaguna, that's me, and Danadasa, we're going to have a conversation now, just to talk about, you know, disadvantages and advantages of Zoom online study groups. And interestingly enough, although when you first start on an online study group, it just feels so alien and so strange to have a bunch of people looking straight at you and having to mute and unmute and all that kind of thing. It's all because it's all so new and strange and slightly alien that you begin to think, oh, it's really a poor second best to being with people in a room. And this is how I felt about a year and a half ago when I ran 2 courses for board members in Australia and New Zealand, the study leading courses, so how to lead study. And I had 9 in each group. And we all had to have a go at leading study and getting feedback. And it was okay, but we all felt that it was so different from leading study in a room that we all, the main sort of feedback was, oh, it's really difficult. It's not at all easy. However, at the end, we all so appreciated being with each other every week and talking about the Dharma that we all wanted to do it again. We said, should we do this again sometime? And should we have a study group? And it was amazing. We just so enjoyed it. So that it does have a really good side as well. And I want to ask you, Danadasa, because I know your experience has been very good and you've been doing this for about 6 years now. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so I started hosting online calls about 6 years ago. And what prompted this is I work very closely with Future Dharma and the men who are training for ordination in the United States and Canada. And 6 years ago, we offered 1 annual ordination training retreat per year. So there were these long stretches of time where the men who were training for ordination just really had no contact with each other if they were not together in their local situations. So I felt compelled to bring some men together from different regions. And of course, that would have to be done online. And I remember when I thought about this, I definitely had my own hesitations, reservations. Will this work? Will it not work? But I just went ahead and did it. So I gathered up about seven men from different practice communities. Met for about 8 months or so. And what we were doing was we were not studying together, but rather we were just checking in with each other. Because I felt the most important thing at that point was actually to see if we could build a sense of community, a sense of connection with each other. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So we were meeting twice a month for about 8 months. And in that time, we all started to get comfortable with the online format. And we all started to get to know each other, actually. And I remember there was one time where we had to skip one of our meetings. So there was a month between our gatherings. And multiple people said, wow, I really missed seeing everyone. I was, oh, that's really interesting. And then about 8 months after that initial start point, we were offering the next ordination training retreat. And every single one of these guys, they wanted to come to the retreat so that we could all gather in person. And I remember one of the guys in the group, Jan, who I've become pretty good friends with, Jan said to me, hey, Danadasa, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. I was like, what? Oh, we've never met in person. So I had completely forgotten that. And it turns out there was a number of guys who hadn't met in person until we all actually gathered on the retreat. And it was as if we were meeting for the first time, but actually we all did know each other really well. So I think the important thing for me was to realize that, wow, connections can definitely unfold and blossom online.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a really great story, that. And what I want to do for the rest of the seminar is move from negative story of online study to a positive story. And those of you who live in England and Britain know this, and probably people all over the world know this, to do with Brexit, right? And Parliament, British Parliament, for the past 3 years. It's been absolutely awful, you know, parliamentarians shouting each other, shouting over each other, jeering when someone's speaking. Absolutely terrible, shameful. But now, because of the lockdown, they've had their first meeting, Prime Minister's question times, online with Zoom. And this is what a reporter had to say. Someone who reports these meetings all the time, he says, the first one, this is like no Prime Minister's questions I've ever seen. And not just for the obvious reasons. It's the atmosphere and the behaviour of MPs. No jeering, no heckling, no playing to the gallery. In the absence of the usual baying and hooting, both the questions and answers are much calmer, more polite, and more constructive. So I thought that was really interesting because it kind of turns on its head the written word online. You know, Twitter and Facebook, they've got really bad reputations these days for people really having a go at each other in the most unpleasant kind of way. But it seems that when you can actually see someone on screen, it has the opposite effect. And have you noticed anything of that, Danadasa?
Most definitely. Funny you should ask. Yeah. So this is actually the reason why we asked you, when you went into those first groups, to have only one microphone unmuted at a time. You know, when you're not speaking, mute. And the reason this is, I found this to be really helpful, is it builds in a pause, and it actually enhances the listening, interestingly enough. So I'll tell some stories about some experiences I've had in in-person groups that actually don't happen online when people's microphones are muted. So I remember there was this one group where there was a few people who were, call them quick-thinking extroverts, and there was a handful of people who were more slow-thinking introverts, more quiet. And I remember there was a part of the discussion where the three men who were quick-thinking extroverts, they started riffing off of each other. Oh, well, this and that, and they were actually kind of talking over each other. And on the one hand, it was a very inspired conversation about the Dharma, and it was quite lovely to witness. But on the other hand, it was leaving people out. So I remember this as a group facilitator. I actually felt the need to intervene and interrupt what was happening, just to rebalance the group dynamics. Well, situations like that actually do not happen online, I've found, with this notion of when you're not speaking, mute yourself. It really enhances the listening. And another thing I've noticed too is I remember, well, there's one person who comes to mind in one of my groups, and this person has a tendency to have strong opinions and has a tendency to voice them quite strongly, and also has a tendency to want to be right. So in person, we'll be having a discussion, and for example, something might happen, and this person will say, well, I don't know about that. Everybody will kind of pause and look over to the person. And then this person will then start talking. Well, this is what I think. Well, that actually doesn't happen because everybody is muted. So I think it really just builds in just this pause. So the listening is better, and there's just a lot less of kind of reactive, off-the-cuff comments.
You also told me, you told me this story earlier, you told me that he knew that this man, I think it was the same man, he knew that he had to work on this, that it was a bit of a pain for everybody else, and he was trying to not do that, but failing not to do it.
That's right.
When it was online, he found he could do it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'd like to move on to another topic here. Bhante's famously said once that the Dharma is not caught, but it's taught. I personally think that's a bit one-sided. No, the other way around, wasn't it? Yeah, not taught, it's caught. That's right. It's not taught, but caught. Personally, I think that's rather one-sided. I think it's both taught and caught. And I suppose some of you might be thinking, is it possible to catch the Dharma through a computer screen? And I think you have a few things to say about that, don't you, Danadasa?
Yeah, this is a very common thing I'll hear from people, who are new to online discussion groups. Well, it's so different than being together, and how does that even work? So I've noticed this, that really if you're new to online meetings, there is this process of acclimation, adjustment. Yeah. Obviously, anything that's new, we have to develop new skills when we're doing this. So being online does require developing some new skills. So, for example, when we're in person, those of us who've led a lot of Dharma study groups, we've tuned into people's nonverbal communication. So some obvious things would be, for example, like if you notice someone is kind of leaning back with their arms crossed, or perhaps even maybe subtly nodding their heads, there's something going on there. So we can pick up on these sorts of verbal cues, or when people are leaning in. But then when you get online, those verbal cues are very hard to decipher. As a matter of fact, I find the nonverbal cues almost indecipherable. So one shift that needs to happen, or one skill that needs to be developed, is we need to rely more on the verbal cues, since we no longer have the nonverbal cues. So from that standpoint, it's actually really important to make sure that everybody is speaking. So one very good way to do this is, let's say you're leading a Mitra study class, and one way to start this is, after you say hello, and say, well, what would you all like to speak about? And then off you go into an open discussion. Well, what I find online that's really important to do is to not jump right into an open discussion, but rather do this. Say, oh, well, welcome everyone. And what I'd like everyone to do is I'd like everyone to share their thoughts about that Mitra study reading. And then I'll mute myself. And then everybody speaks. So you have an opportunity to listen to people. So going back to that group, the men's group, the very first one, is after you spend some time with people, you start to tune into their baseline, and you start to get a sense of them. It's really, you enter into their lives. And then if their baseline changes, well, that's a cue. So for example, if someone tends to be quite upbeat and talkative, and then they show up one time and they're more kind of subdued in their speech, you can pick up on that. So there's definitely cues there, but they tend to be verbal. So just by tuning in over a period of time, you can start to pick up these cues. And also these positive cues as well, in terms of the Dharma being caught. So I'm actually reminded of, listening to Bhante's talks, when he starts out really slow, and then at the end, he'll get really animated, and his speech pattern just picks up, and you can just hear the life in his voice, the energy in his voice. Well, something similar you can notice as well when you're in Dharma study groups as well.
Thank you. That's really good. Really good. I'm going to bring up one more topic, and then we're going to go back into groups and try something. Danadasa and I read an article this week, a BBC article on the BBC Work Life website. And the article was called "The Reason Zoom Calls Drain Your Energy." And it's very interesting. And I'm just going to read you a bit of it. One 2014 study by German academics showed that delays on the phone or conferencing systems shaped our views of people negatively. So that means if you can't speak when it would be normal, you know, in a face-to-face situation, people unconsciously view that negatively. Even delays of 1.2 seconds made people perceive the responder as less friendly or focused. What do you think about that?
I find that so interesting, especially when you name it as being unconscious or subconscious, because I agree with that. Yeah, so it's very much like if you were listening to the radio and there was dead air, like, oh, that's a bad thing. So we can actually bring that unconscious kind of conditioning to our online experience as well. So I think it's really important to be sensitive to silence actually during these Zoom calls. So one thing that I always like to do when I start a Zoom call is the very first thing we do is I'll just do a 5. So obviously there's an aspect of just arriving, but there's also
we just missed a bit there, Danadasa. You for a second.
I cut out? Yeah, sorry. Thank you for letting me know. So I like to start the meetings actually with a 5-minute meditation so that we all have the opportunity to arrive. But actually there's also something else going on. We all have the opportunity to sit in silence online together. Yeah, so it does take some getting used to.
Good. I'm a great fan of silence and study groups. Actually, I think we could do more of it consciously, because with silence, you're encouraging people to move from the first level of wisdom, Sutta Maya Panya, hearing, to the second level of wisdom, Chinta Maya Panya, thinking or reflecting. And I think it would be good actually if we actually built that into our study groups a bit more quite consciously. And obviously it can be done very easily on Zoom. But I think we'll move on. Are you ready to move on, Danadasa?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, because we've done quite a bit of talking. Now we want to do some more practical things. What we're going to do in a few moments is you're going to go back into your groups and you're going to do some study together. But to do that, before you do that, I want to show you a picture. There it is. So this is a picture of the beings who live in Sukhavati. And I'm showing you that picture for 2 reasons. One, because in a moment you're going to be studying a line from the Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra about the beings in Sukhavati. That will be your topic. So I wanted you to see them and just look how lovely they are and what a great time they're having, dancing, singing, playing musical instruments. They're just having a great relaxing time, which is important. The other reason I'm showing you this picture is because it's a really good thing you can do on Zoom online study groups. You can show a picture, especially if you're doing a more imaginative study. Say you're doing the White Lotus Sutra or the Vimalakirti Nadesha. You could, pull up a picture of Vimalakirti and everyone looks at him for a while and talks about him, and it brings that more imaginal element into your study. So just try to remember that picture. And now we're going to show you the text that you're going to study or discuss. The living beings in Sukhavati have no particular expectations. They are free of expectations. They simply do not think in that way. Right? So that's your study material. You don't have to remember it word by word, but you just get the gist. They don't have expectations. They have no particular expectations. That's all you really need to do. So how are we going to do this? You're going to go back into your groups, and as soon as you go back, I want you to decide who's going to lead that session. And please don't spend ages at it. Just decide and someone does it, because you'll all learn. The person who leads will learn what it's like to lead study in a study group, but you'll all be watching that person too, and you'll all be learning at the same time. And we're going to give you 20 minutes to do that, 20 minutes to discuss. And it's not that the leader of the study has to know any more about that line than anybody else. It's not one of those kind of things. It's more a way just to have a conversation, and the leader can learn what it's like to lead a discussion, a free and open discussion. I'm going to hand over to Danadasa to just say a few more words about that before we move you into your groups.
Yeah. I'll actually say one more thing about what's going to happen after you come out of your groups. So we're going to put you into groups for 20 minutes, pick a study leader, and you'll explore that verse. And then we're going to bring you back to the main room. And then Ratnaguna is going to say a few more words about giving and receiving feedback. And then we'll put you back into those rooms for 15 minutes to engage with those instructions. So that's a little preview. So before we send you to the breakout room, I wanted to just say a little something about for the study leader and also for the participants of how to participate. So there's this tool of, when you're not speaking, you can mute your microphone. Well, what if you would like to speak? Well, you would wait for the other person to mute their microphone, but then maybe you're trying to jump in and somebody else does. So there's a couple ways to actually raise your hand. So of course you can do this. You can simply just raise your hand. But actually in the video feed, that may or may not work, because if the host or the facilitator is in speaker view, they're not going to see you. Or if the facilitator is on a phone, on a mobile phone, your video feed may not be on the screen. So they may not actually see your hand up in the video feed. So another alternative is in the chat, you can actually just type the word hand, which then everybody will see. So that's the equivalent of, when you're in an in-person group and there's a topic that's being discussed and you want to interject something and you just raise your hand and you catch the study leader's eye and they kind of look at you. Oh, yep, you're next. So that's the equivalent of doing that when you're in an online group.
And if 3 people put their hand up about the same time, what would you do, Danadasa?
Well, I would just, kind of say, well, actually, in a small study group of 7, I've just found that people are able to self-manage themselves, and I don't actually have to do anything. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is Varashura is going to send you to your breakout groups, and you'll be there for 20 minutes. And when you arrive there, Varashura's he's going to send the text again in a broadcast message, so you'll be able to see it again. And then we're also going to send you another broadcast message to give you a 5-minute warning. And then, of course, the 1-minute warning will be when you see the pop-up box with the 60-second countdown. All right. Anything else, Ratnaguna?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. So enjoy your study groups.
Great, Ratnaguna, back to you. Everyone's here.
We're all together again? Okay.
We're all together again.
So you're not going to be with us for very much longer. You're going to go back into your groups in a moment, but you've just done a 20-minute study. Maybe for some of you, the first time you've ever done that on Zoom. For some of you, it won't be the first time, obviously. But what we want you to do now is go back to your group and really talk about that experience. I hope you haven't done that already. I hope you carried on studying for 20 minutes. Going to go back and talk about your experience. And this is not a teacher training event. So we're not giving the study leader feedback on how they teach. It's not one of those things. We can do that another time. This is more what happened there and what worked and what didn't. Because for some people, some works really well and other people it don't. We had something saying today in the earlier one. Danadasa had mentioned muting everyone, and somebody wrote in, one of the participants wrote in and said, well, we found that didn't work for some people. The quiet people, they never came in because they didn't want to unmute. And so for some of them, half of them are unmuted and the others are muted. So go back to your groups now and just talk about that. And the leader might say, well, I found this and I found it a bit hard to do this. And others of you who will have noticed how the leader was leading, but also noticed what it was like to be in a group, to say what works for you and what doesn't, and just have some ideas about how you might go on in the future. Okay, so do you want to say any more about that, Danadasa?
Oh yeah, Ratnaguna, you wanted to mention that the facilitator should go first.
Thank you. Yeah. So as always, when you go back into your group, whoever was leading the discussion, they talk about their own experience first, what it was like to lead, and then you, the facilitator, you decide who's going to go next, and you just go around like that. Well, maybe you don't have to do it like that. Anyway, you decide how you want to do it. Once the study leader has said what it was like for them, then you decide how you're going to run that feedback session. So goodbye again, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. So welcome back, everybody. I hope those groups went well and they were useful. And it would be good to know if they were. We're not going to be able to do it in this format, but we're coming to the end of this seminar now, but what we'd like now is for you to fill a feedback form in, which Vajrashura will send to you, or you could just send an email if you want, but whichever's the most easy for you to do. You don't have to do a feedback form, but it would be useful for myself and Danadasa, because we are going to carry on and do a few more things. And also, if you have any, obviously we could only cover a very small aspect of doing study groups online today, so there's so much more to do. So what would be helpful for us in planning our podcasts, our future podcasts, are if you could send us something about what you would like to do. I would like to do this, and what do you think about this, and so on, and just send questions to us. And what we'll do, we'll gather all the feedback and all the questions, and one day, sometime soon, we'll look at it and try and figure it all out and decide what we'll do in the future. So yes, you can email your questions to Danadasa. Now, I'm aware that I'm just making probably what might be confusing information here. I've just said, did I say Vajrashura earlier, Danadasa?
You said to, I think you did. But,
oh, that's it. It's the feedback form Vajrashura is going to send you. But if you've got anything you want to say about today, or any questions you've got, send them to Danadasa. And after this, Vajrashura is going to send out an email to you all with Danadasa's email address on it, plus quite a few other things as well. So we hope that you found this useful and hopefully enjoyable too. I can tell you it was a lot easier for me this afternoon than it was this morning, because my computer did what it's supposed to do today. And we actually found that having done it once, Danadasa found it a lot easier, and it was a bit better this afternoon. So you got the long straw today. And I think that's it, really. Anything more?
Perhaps I'll just say one concluding remark, which is, the more you do Zoom meetings or facilitate discussion groups, the better you'll get. It's kind of obvious. And there isn't necessarily a right way or a wrong way or best practices per se. I mean, I'm just sharing with you what I've found to be effective, but you may find that something different for you is effective. So one of my practice slogans is, do it and review it. Just try stuff out, talk with the people in your group, get some feedback, and change course appropriately. So that's all I've got to add.
We just missed the last 2 seconds. You cut out for a couple of seconds.
So it's just, so try things out and, get some feedback, try things out, learn from your mistakes, learn from your successes, and have some fun with it. Just play with it.
Great, thank you. I would just like, before we go, I'd like to thank Danadasa for getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was before that, actually, from 1 till 2:30 in the morning. He was with us, and then he had a few hours sleep, and he's come back. And he's done an awful lot of work this last week with me. And all his 6 years of experience has been really invaluable. So I'd really like to thank you for coming to this and helping Danadasa. I'd like to thank Vajrashura for hosting us so well. He's got so much, he knows what he's doing when he's hosting. He's got a lot of experience in that. Plus, he's just really brilliant to work with. Vajrashura is just a dream to work with. He's just so reasonable and so skillful. And I'd like to thank Subhadramati, who, when I sent her the advert last week, she said, oh, I was going to have a day off today, but that looks too good. And she's come twice. She was here this morning and this afternoon when she should have been having a day off. So have an evening off now, Subhadramati. Okay, everybody.
And I'd like to thank Ratnaguna as well for all the work, and he's just such a brilliant study leader, and it was so well led as well. So what I propose we do is I'm just going to allow everyone to unmute themselves, and I'll let you unmute yourself, and maybe we could just have a cloud of thanks for Danadasa and Ratnaguna. So do unmute yourself to do that, and then we'll finish with that. You might want to switch back to gallery view as well to see everyone. So big thank you to the guys.
Thanks, Ratnaguna.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Great to see everybody.
Very good to see everybody.